think that we initially were going to have 3 prizes. And then after the judges began to choke each other, we realized we needed to have another, what was the next level, 15? No, we had 14. We had 11 more prizes to 14. So we wound up with 14. Well, that wasn't enough. So the screaming and kicking continued until we got up to 29 prizes. We added 15 more. So that was an experiment, but it worked out well. This is also an experiment. It's called the challenge. It's a double-edged sword. It's a challenge for BICS, Bigelow Institute for Consciousness Studies. It's a challenge for whoever the grantees are. So the grantors and grantees here are both going to be challenged in this process. It's the entire process. This actually, September 1st is our launch of this, and we will conclude it by April the 1st of 24. Correct?
And actually, after that, there's a 3-month evaluation period that ends on August 1st, 2024.
Right.
So we're really looking at almost 2 years from today to August 1st of 2024. So it's a 2-year grant cycle, we could define that as.
Right. So we are, again, starting out conservatively. The total grants are going to be $1 million. And this is, the way we're couching this is that it's up to $1 million. There are increments where we have 10, let's see, we have 12 at $600 at $50,000.
Yeah, I could just go to the next slide.
Okay, please do. So we have a dozen grants, I think at 50,000, which is $600,000, 50,000 each, and 4 more at 100,000, 100K each. But we realized that, well, what if the preponderance of submittals turn out to be that there really aren't a lot of home runs, but there are maybe reasons to award $20,000, $30,000 grants. So it could be that the 50K and the 100K are broken up. By the other token, it could be that there's a piggybacking effect. Somebody starts off with a 50K, they're proposing a 2-phase situation, and they're proposing for 100K after that. And so maybe we award 150K for that. And we're going to be getting into more of this later, but I want to say that what we're looking for, and we're going to be specific in what the slides say as to what we're looking for, but generally this is about contact. We know the other side exists. Now we're about communication and contact, as if we were pursuing ET, right? But we're not. So this is about communication and contact, which has been millennia. This is nothing new. But we're looking for specific kinds of things through the grant process in the way of contact. We're not interested in relatives. That's not the point. We're looking for information. And I will be quiet here in a minute and let column and the slides speak for themselves. If this is successful, then we go on to phase 3. And right now, if we were to say, we'll put in $5 million a year into this field, how in the world would that be responsibly adjudicated and handled by the community of researchers? We doubt that it could be. We have to start somewhere. The $5 million a year is possible. I'm not saying that. I'm not throwing it out there because that's an irrelevant number, and I'm not serious about it. But I don't think there's anybody in this room that doesn't agree that you have to be a lot more conservative, and the research community can't handle that, right? We had to change our own entire setup in terms of BICS operations, where we were going to have a large staff of in-house researchers, but we couldn't find the staff. We couldn't find the qualified people. So we had to come up with this program to use the research community that already exists globally. So we felt that's what made sense. So we're starting out at $1 million. To us, that's conservative. But for us, it's the process that really matters here. What are we going to get back? Okay, Colin.
And so one of the things that we should say about for example, the $100,000 grants is that we would encourage individual researchers to start thinking about forming collaborations, maybe consortiums of researchers to begin pooling resources if they decide to actually go forward and solicit an attempt at $100,000. As we said in this slide, we're giving grants up to $50,000. So BICS internal evaluation process will determine what the dollar value is per grant. But we would encourage people, even at this very early stage, to begin the process of thinking about collaborations, consortiums. You know, for the BICS essay contest that Robert just spoke about, we had several different consortiums that submitted essays from different countries, different laboratories within, the United States. But the success was in many cases because of consortiums that were formed. So the $100,000 grant could be looked at from that perspective. So I'm going to go to the next slide. And this is a very important slide because it really defines what Bigelow Institute for Consciousness Studies is looking for. This is a series of grants that are targeted pretty closely at the exclusive to survival of human consciousness beyond permanent bodily death. But within that category, there's also an emphasis on what are the best ways to research, contact, or communication with quote unquote the afterlife or the other side. And that is, we're encouraging researchers into, for example, mediumship, those who have research experience in channeling, remote viewing, automatic writing, hypnotic regression, lucid dreaming. So there's many, many different categories that come collectively under this general rubric of contact or communication with the afterlife. Another really important part of what we're looking for is, does this research break new ground? Is it moving the ball down the field? Or has it been done before? Is there sort of novelty? Is it a brand new set of ideas, or is it more of the same? And BICS evaluators will be looking closely at that whole aspect. Also, communication and contact with the afterlife. Obviously, information needs to be validated. Any information coming from a source like that will have to be validated. And we will be looking to propose grantees for the level of sophistication in terms of experimental controls, and also what strategies are being used to validate the information. The spiritist Allan Kardec, for example, way back in history, determined that a body of information from mediumship was valid only after that same information came through 7 separate mediums. I mean, that's an example of an indicator of validity, a potential indicator of validity, but there are obviously a lot more. Now, the process that we're talking about really is in 2 phases. The first phase has to do with a preliminary application. So preliminary applications will be submitted to BICS by the early November of 2022. There will be a 2-month period window whereby between the 1st of November of 2022 and the 1st of January 2023, preliminary applications will be sent in. And that's just basically BICS evaluators will be looking at what kind of background people have, what kind of project people intend to submit, and how cogent they are in thinking of what kind of a submission that they're putting out. In other words, how sophisticated it is.
You want to put up those time frames on the next slide. The next one to show those timeframes.
Yeah, we're looking at these important dates. So at the start of this, we're now at September 1. So 60 days from now is really when the clock starts for preliminary applications. So between November 1st of 2022 and the 1st of January of 2023, we are encouraging all preliminary applications to be submitted to BICS. Now, that is not to say that beginning in the next couple of weeks, people in the audience who are interested in this program can't begin to formulate their preliminary proposals, because honestly, the BICS evaluators would much prefer to have the peak of applications coming in midway through this time period, as opposed to just before 5 p.m. on the 1st of January of 2023. You know, going back to the essay contest, we noticed there was a dramatic increase in the number of applications that happened in the 10 minutes before the deadline. In spite of the fact that there was a lot of notice given out. So I know that this is standard operating procedure, but we would encourage people to think about this from now. The deadline is 4 months away for preliminary applications. So it would be worthwhile thinking about it even now, and hopefully submitting something, you know, in November or early December. Once we go through the evaluation process of the preliminary application, and the next slide will show you, you know, the process for the preliminary application. The formal proposals will be submitted between January 1st and April the 1st. So the cutoff date will be 5 p.m. Pacific time on April 1st of 2023. And at that stage, the evaluation process for the formal proposals will begin, and the start date for the actual execution of the proposal will begin on August 1st of 2023. And there's a 9-month window where the execution of the proposal takes place, ending in May of 2024, May 1st, 2024. And these are all tagged at 5 p.m. Pacific time on May of 2024. BICS will look at the body of work beginning in May, or actually beginning a long time before May 1st, 2024. And we'll start examining the quality and also the body of work that has been produced between August of 2023 and May of 2024. And we'll finish our evaluation process around August of 2024. So here we are on September 1st of 2022. And as we mentioned at the very beginning of this is really a 2-year grant cycle, which is not unusual in the grant giving world of National Institutes of Health and other organizations. But these dates are important, and we would encourage at every stage of this whole process that people start to think about what is needed in order to submit a proposal. And we'll go through the logistics in the next few slides. But I would emphasize again, the earlier the better. So what are we looking for in the preliminary application? This is a standard operating procedure for a lot of granting agencies. They call them letter of intent or preliminary proposals. There are other words, but we're looking for a succinct, cogent, thorough summary of a person's background. We're not necessarily looking for a 65-page curriculum vitae. We're looking at what the highlights of a person's background, experience, and skill set are in order to make the BICS evaluators confident that these people have the background in order to be able to submit this. We're also looking for a thorough summary of the proposed project. Now that's also important because we are not defining a page limit for the thorough summary of the project. And the reason for that is that some people take longer than others in order to, in order to express themselves. But we would greatly encourage a brief, succinct, but also very thorough summaries. The email address that we will be using is exactly the same email address that we successfully used throughout the BICS essay competition. And if people have a pen, they should probably write it down. It's info@bigelowinstitute.org. By the way, all of this information by close of business tomorrow will be on the BICS website also. So you can, the BICS website is www.bigelowinstitute.org. So the preliminary applications will need to be submitted between the 1st of November and the 1st of January 2023. And then we will be notifying successful applicants that they are authorized to submit formal proposals. At this stage, as Robert said, this is a very experimental process. So we don't know how many preliminary applications we're going to get. We were absolutely floored, actually, during the essay contest when we were deluged by thousands of emails and applications. So we don't know what the popularity of this particular program is going to be. But again, we would encourage preliminary proposals to be submitted sooner rather than later. So once you go through the gates and successfully, you will be informed, by the way, that you've passed the preliminary proposal stage, and therefore that you're good to go for submitting a full formal application. We will tell you right now, though, that you will be informed whether you succeed or didn't succeed. But if you did not succeed, you will not be told necessarily why you didn't succeed, because we have a limited staff, and depending on the number of preliminary proposals, we may not have the bandwidth in order to make that happen. That's and again, that's a pretty standard, I think, process for preliminary grant applications. So we're looking at the formal proposal not to exceed 10,000 words. We're looking at 12-point font, and then a standard sort of setup that's detailed in the slide. We want the abstract should be really cogent enough to summarize nicely to a BICS evaluator what the intent and scope and the novelty of this project or proposal is. Then we need objectives, and we need a line item budget, itemized budget. And we also want milestones, proposed milestones, being tied to a particular dollar number in the budget. We should emphasize that we'll be looking and evaluating each proposal on a case-by-case basis, but people who dramatically front-load dollar numbers into their proposals so that 90% of the dollar numbers are in the first few weeks probably will not be taken as seriously as people who have a more measured approach to tying milestones to dollar numbers. So that's just a word of, I guess that's also standard operating procedure.
In other words, we don't want you to take the NASA approach that we took.
That's touche. So one of the aspects of this program that we're looking at, or that we want to look at, is for the applicant to describe why this project is novel, why it's important, why it's going to break new ground, and how it can benefit the field, the overall field of survival of human consciousness after death. We also would like a summary and conclusion at the end. And as I said, all of these processes will be on our website by close of business tomorrow. We want to talk a bit about the process, the contact and communication part with the other side. It is the primary focus of this program, and I did mention that people who are researching mediumship, channeling, 10 minutes. Lucid dreaming, remote viewing, automatic writing, hypnotic regression, and there are multiple other categories that fit into the overall rubric of communication with the other side, quote unquote. All of these aspects are going to be treated differently, and it is of primary importance that the person or the group that are proposing this be very aware of the need to validate the information that is allegedly coming from the other side. I mean, that is not going to be a BICS responsibility. That is going to be the responsibility of the people who are proposing the work. And so the more creative the people can get, the researchers can get in executing on that, the more favorably the proposal will be looked at. And it goes without saying that sort of excessively onerous charts and graphs that are in the body of work serve to slow the evaluation process down. So these are sort of standard things about grant applications. And for those researchers that are involved in the whole process of studying, for example, people who are communicating with the other side, there may be a need to submit institutional review board documentation. And that's the kind of thing that on September 1st, 2022, that if people are thinking about this, it's the kind of thing that would be useful to get ducks in a row. We don't need a super sophisticated set, but a signed, sealed, and delivered signature and date with independent review board approval is going to be may be necessary for some of these proposals. So that is a part that people should be thinking of if that is pertinent to the proposal that you intend to submit. And as you know, Robert Bigelow and the team have had a lot of experience in industry. Robert Bigelow has been a general contractor for decades. The industry experience of Bigelow Aerospace, for example, all of the industry experience leads BICS to request that all of the so-called grantees be classified as independent contractors. So these, the people who receive grants will be classified as independent contractors. And that is the most unambiguous, legally simple definition of a grantee. And it will be required for any grantees to be classified as independent contractors. There will be a need to submit signed liability release and informed consent form. All of these will be on the BICS website over time as we complete this. And remember, these are not necessarily required for the preliminary application, but they are definitely required for the final, the more formal application. And as we mentioned, all of these measures are in place to protect BICS. The rest of this is going to be on our website, and I should mention, for those of you who do not have one of these bags, the first 200 people who have taken part in this lunch are entitled to have one of these bags. Inside this bag is a little folder, and inside the folder there's a summary of exactly what I have been talking about today. So if people want to pick up any remaining bags that are left outside, they will find a full written summary of what I've been talking about today. There's also we will be requiring joint ownership of the data and reports according to the contract, and this is from our perspective, this is an industry norm. And then all of the activity in terms of hiring, for example, if a particular grantee or independent contractor decides to hire a group of mediums to conduct research, it is the responsibility of that independent contractor to make sure that all of the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. BICS is not going to be responsible for any of that process. It is the full responsibility of everybody who is part of the independent contractor. And I would again repeat that email address, info@bigelowinstitute.org. I think at this stage, we will take questions from the floor. We've given you a thumbnail sketch of what the program is going to look like. There are logistical questions, I'm sure, and also more general questions. But the summary, I think, is it starts the process. So any questions that you might have, we'll be happy to take.
We have microphones on each side over here. Don't be bashful. Speak loudly and keep relatively short. Are there any other slides, other bullet points that we?
No, I should also mention though that this contest is open to not only people in the United States, but people from all countries. As Robert had mentioned, our essay contest was, we gathered submissions from 39 countries, and we are opening this new grants program in the same way to all countries. And obviously the evaluation process will take care of the rest.
So step up to the microphones. Yes, sir.
Hey. So at the end of the process, what you'll end up with will be data in the form of verbal descriptions of information from the other side. Is that correct? I mean, the end of the day, all the data is going to be verbal in its final form, is it not?
Well, you might be also able to command actual physicality, things that are acted upon with witnesses. I'm just brainstorming here.
Yeah.
You know, so it may not always be entirely verbal. It may be something that's via demonstration on camera or with witnesses by testimony that might be relevant.
But all of that would also be verbal. I mean, if it was testimony, it would also be verbal in its final form. But if you're saying about a physical manifestation, that of course would be something different. My question really relates to that, and that is this. Modern medical science uses AI to parse language to get concepts that are similar, even though they're stated in different language. And this seems to be would be part of the way to cut across the different language or descriptions that are used, because these are all anecdotal reports that you're going to ultimately get from this question that you're asking, is it not?
Well, we're after contact and communication.
Right.
So it could be through various kinds of activities. And verbal doesn't include automatic writing. Agreed?
Sure.
Okay. So just as one example, it doesn't have to be all verbal.
Okay.
Now we need to keep, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
So we have to have somebody else
Sure.
get the opportunity. Yeah, yes.
I appreciate what you have shared with us and that you're taking the initiative to launch this kind of an effort because it has been missing in research possibilities for a long time, looking at a broader scope. And I'm curious if you're willing to share what moved you to act personally in this direction.
So let me just kind of punt and not answer your question like a typical politician doesn't. So what we're kind of looking for through contact, as I said earlier, is not deceased relatives, commentary, that kind of thing. We're looking for guidance. We're looking for information. We're looking at different kinds of things without being too specific because we don't want to coach grantees. So that's about, I have to limit myself to that.
I know there's a bigger story behind that. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, Dr. Christina Rolls. I wanted to first thank you for pioneering the paradigm shift that we're already in. And just ask if you are familiar with VerySoul, VerySoul. They have now vetted over 700 evidential mediums for the past 6 months all over the world, and I'm one of them. So if you haven't heard of them, you might want to get in touch with them. They've been vetting them for, you might know already. So if not, just that's all. VerySoul, and I'll be doing the spirit photography demonstration here tomorrow. They come every time.
Thank you.
Yep.
The vetting process is very important. Yeah. Yeah.
I do have a logistical question. To complete a study starting August 1st to May 1st is a very short time in the research world. For example, I just went through an IRB process that took 6 weeks. So either people are going to have to, and it's quite an investment of time just to go through the IRB, especially with this kind of research. I mean, I've never had to like I did when I tried to study facilitating counseling. So it's
Speaking of this.
okay. So is there so either somebody's going to have to do the IRB before they find out that they've been chosen, which is a big investment, or they're going to have to wait and then be delayed, some period of time before they can actually begin data collection. It just seems like a short time. Is there any flexibility about completing after May 1st of 2024?
Not just no, but hell no. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm just kidding. Okay.
I think in answer to your question, we will be researching the most expeditious ways of addressing the IRB question, and we've already begun that process, and we should have more information as time goes on. But we would encourage people to begin the process as soon as logistically possible. Now, obviously, your question does pertain to investment of time and all of that, but there are ways of expediting IRB processes. And we already have some information on that. We would like to get some more. But the second part of your question pertains to the 9-month period. We feel, and this is an experimental program, And what we would like to do is to set the bar in a relatively short time frame in order to gather the data as relatively as quickly as possible. And the sorts of programs that we're looking at, if they are ongoing, can be set up relatively quickly. If somebody is starting from the beginning, that's an issue, but that's another reason why we're encouraging people to form consortiums and encouraging people to reach out, pool resources, and that sort of thing, so that people can hit the ground running.
Thank you.
That's a really good point that Jan brought up.
Yeah, it is.
Very important. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
I noted that the necessary components is both communication and then some sort of, not just chatting with dead relatives but some sort of guidance or wisdom. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that. Is the communication important? Is the validation of communication important? And the wisdom itself, is that more or less, are they all weighted equally?
In this humble context, about as important as the air we breathe. It's everything. Everything you just said.
Yes. Okay.
So it really, really matters, because this has potential. Huge, maybe. We'll have to see. This can be greatly expanded depending upon what's received and how we team together and where we go from here after this phase 2 of the challenge.
Great. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Mr. Bigelow and Calm, thank you very much. We have a couple of questions, folks watching online. The first one is, will the final due dates be firm?
At this point in time, and I'll let Colin address this also, because I think at this point in time, we have to establish parameters. And then it's kind of a living organism almost, because as we did in the contest, we had to make adjustments as it became clear that those dictations we had to pay attention to. So we have to follow the dictates of logic and common sense. So in this case, we are setting firm parameters that are flexible depending upon the experiences that we have with the grantees, the volume of people. We don't know whether we're going to get 3 applications or 3,000. We just don't know. And so, but we have an open mind to being flexible. Colin?
Yeah, I would agree with Robert. I think the adjustment part of this will, it'll occur by necessity, and it'll be a majority. If there's a majority trend that's obvious as time goes on, we will adjust accordingly. I mean, I think that the experience with the BICS essay contest that Robert just spoke about, there were 3 very dramatic separate phases to the expansion of the BICS prize money, based on the unexpected discovery by the judges that there was an overwhelming number of really high quality essays, and that was not anticipated at the very beginning, but it became obvious as time went on. So an adjustment, 2 major adjustments from Robert Bigelow occurred to dramatically expand the prize money. So we are saying those parameters right now are set up, but we will adjust accordingly, according to the majority of the incoming proposals.
The next question from online is, how scientific does it need to be?
Okay, so we have the traditional scientific model, right, which really doesn't work in this field very well. And another sister field very well. So the traditional scientific model doesn't involve thought, any cosmological solution. not in string theory, M theory, none of it. In fact, they back into their conclusions about Big Bang, backing into using multiple theories and coming at handcrafted assumptions and make it fit. So it's not legitimate. So the parochial methodology is not what you should be looking for. It has to be the proof, and the truth has to be created in ways that cover as many bases as you possibly can under the circumstances. It's really difficult to have a lot of personal experiences and then have to codify and memorialize that in some kind of way you can take it to a jury, unless they themselves have had the same thing. How are they going to believe in all that you've seen and what's happened, or people close around you, and so on and so on, right? So this is outside the boundary of traditional scientific methodologies. We recognize that.
And also, I could add that, I mean, there are already in the peer-reviewed literature several examples of very well-controlled quintuple blind studies on mediumship that have been executed according to clinical trials parameters in the pharmaceutical industry. And so you could make the argument that even though the topic is controversial, the methodology that's been applied to this topic has been scientific. And so there is room for the scientific method in this whole process. But as Robert said, there has to be the creative input into that. And I would also add that, going back 120 years to the whole study of mediumship using with scientists like Sir William Crookes and Sir Oliver Lodge and Charles Richet, who won the Nobel Prize. And these were very high-level people applying scientific processes to a very sort of nascent phenomenon. But they did establish a set of scientific procedures. So it's difficult, but not impossible.
All right, we have a couple more questions. This one, are there safeguards that are generally employed in this kind of research?
We have somebody else start our car. So, that's just routine. I mean, am I off base? I don't know.
Very good. And sort of related, what are the dangers or risks associated with this sort of research into the unknown?
We have, since we started BICS, and I may as well mention this, I don't know, in March of 2020, those ourselves, members of our family, and especially members of our staff, had a lot of things begin, and it hasn't stopped. So there seems to be some kind of connection to attention and a stimulus from the various phenomena. And it also happens in a sister area of another subject, the same kind of thing. And you don't know exactly how to predict what's going to be happening. Sometimes it's adverse in a very small, minor minority of instances, but sometimes, and we've experienced that.
Okay, next question. Who will be reviewing the projects?
Colin Kelleher, myself, and a new staff fellow named Leo Rookaby. I started saying Rookaby. Leo Rookaby. Yes.
Thank you. Martin Tanner, it's a pleasure to be here. You've mentioned several times legal metaphors, burden of proof, convince a jury, beyond a reasonable doubt. I assume, but I would love to hear some clarification that what you're really looking for is something that's, number one, persuasive, and number two, even if it's not absolute proof positive, you are still very interested as long as it's very persuasive. Is that a close summary, or do you actually want a legal analysis at some point on burdens of proof in your submissions?
So taking it into the realm of court, we've just bypassed and sidestepped the parochial scientific methodology. It doesn't matter as being the gospel. There are two different worlds. The court can convict on a lot of categorical kinds of things that scientific methodologies aren't able to even address. They're out of step. They're behind the times. They're out of step. And there's a difference between, criminal cases and civil cases. You have more liberty and latitude in civil cases. So we're segueing into that type of mode in order to not be cavalier about what truth is and what truth really means. Truth really matters. Facts really matter. That's the problem in this field, is that facts are based on experiences and activities that are not easy to replicate. They're really difficult, or you're going to get something different and something new that surprised you, and you didn't have your camera ready. I've had those things happen to me lots of different times, and so have a lot of people I know. So it's extremely tough to replicate. But witnesses matter, testimony matters, the preponderance of the accumulation of witnesses matter. And who were those witnesses? Did you pull them off the street, or were they, so there's a difference between witnesses that see phenomenal things and those that maybe don't have a background that you would believe anyway. Right? I don't know if that's been a help.
It does. You're looking for something credible that's persuasive from good sources.
And hopefully that we can build on, at the end of the day, after this is all over, we want to really get in and build and really expand.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Test. We have another, hello. Okay. And we have another question online. Can an organization submit, or an individual, I suppose, can an organization or an individual submit more than one proposal?
At this time, I think we will keep it to one proposal per organization or per individual. But again, I think we will take that on a case-by-case basis. Certainly preliminary proposals, we will be looking for one proposal per individual. We don't want an individual submitting 10 separate proposals.
So another sidebar question, what if you had an organization, you had 5 people, and each of them, they sent 5 proposals, but each one of them was the nominee on the proposal.
Each one of them was.
So there was a lead proposer, a lead grantee, and so you had 5 leads in one organization. Would we allow that? So each of them, so they wound up proposing 5 different proposals, but you had 5 in 5 different.
Yeah,
names.
5 separate consortiums.
So there was a name identified to each proposal as the lead engineer for that particular proposal. What would we do?
Can we get back to you?
I think so. Yes. There you are.
We'll get back to you.
I think that's a good answer. We don't know.
Good question.
We have to think about that. Anybody else? Oh, yes, sir.
I've had a couple of several experiences in my life with instruction. And something that comes to my mind is many of those times, those giving me instruction have given me a warning before they gave me information. And these were not beings that I would say had a physical body. And so from my experience, I think some people like me, because I was given warnings about specific information that was related to me, I think it's fascinating, the study of it, because my life seems to be what you're trying to study. My experiences are based on what you're talking about. And when you have those experiences, it opens you up and you don't get to close that back off. And that's part of the warnings that were coming along with the instruction was, hey, just so you know, if you pursue this, you're not going to be able to close the door anymore. So it's almost like the door that protects or covers this level of conscious awareness has been placed there for a reason. And so that's something that comes to my mind when people are doing research on this. You know, the awareness that I've been given specific instruction to be forewarned that this instruction comes along with a great responsibility. And it's permanent. What's given to you is permanent. And you're not going to be able to not undo it. Kind of like in the Matrix, taking the pill. You just can't not take the pill after you do this research and understand it. And I'm sure it sounds like as you've done the research, you've experienced some of these things and after effects of that. And I have experienced entities of, you know, different levels of consciousness, lower and higher, and they're all real. And, you know, the trauma that I experienced from the lower ones, you know, some of that trauma has taken me years and years and years and years to heal from and understand what I was meant to learn from it. And this is my first time coming to INDS. I just felt an intuitive compelling for me to be here, and that's why I'm here today. I haven't shared my experiences with a lot of people, and I didn't necessarily come to share them. I didn't know what I was coming for. I just knew I was supposed to be here. But I'm interested in the research because it's been a big part of my life, these experiences. But somebody like me, I don't have anyone that's a reference to what I experienced other than these beings and my own mom that I got to talk with after she passed away.
Well,
And so people like me to do anything like this, to give you any credibility of research, it only seems like I would have to find several other people like me that could validate my experience, because all 5 of us or all 10 of us have experienced the same thing.
right. Well, let me first thank you for sharing this with us. And what this gentleman is saying is he's opening up a topic that isn't often focused on by researchers. And so if any of you have done a lot of research, then you understand there is a dark side to some of it. Okay, I see a head or two nodding. We know that, Colin and I do. So this has to be taken very seriously. And there are philosophies and policies, procedures in your own heart and your own mind that you have to adopt and embrace. Love is the most powerful component of all as to the objectivity of the entire end result. 2 things: knowledge and love. Love is number 1. And every story that you encounter usually professes at least the love part of it as being very predominant. But there is a dark side to other features. Earthbound spirits, according to the research, outnumber vastly all the other levels combined. And they're an amalgam of different kinds of human kinds of attitudes, just as bad as anybody walking on the face of the earth that's already incarnated. You don't want to go down those paths. There's ways of avoiding them and ways of not giving them power, but you have to respect them. You have to respect every spirit. And the process on the other side is to try to help them, to try to elevate them. And it's a matter of function of whether you want to be helped or not, as to whether you're going to make any progress on the other side. That's what the literature and the research say. Okay. So we've had to deal with these kinds of things. So we're not novices and entirely in this field, even though we've been in it a relatively short time. Although I started with sitters and being a sitter back in the early 80s. So it's been some while that I detoured from that. But thank you very much for sharing it, because this is a very important thing. It's real. It's not to be laughed at or joked about. And if you do, it's because you haven't done any research, or you haven't done enough. You haven't talked to enough people. You haven't read enough, or you haven't had anything happen to you, or somebody that you know happened to you. Or then you won't laugh anymore. That's really serious. Okay. In all of our studies and all of our research in the ET field, that almost never happened. Never happened. There were some scary things that happened to people that we were connected with, government people, but and we had other kinds of manifestations and things. But in our particular experience, people didn't get physically hurt. Fortunately. So, yes, sir.
Real brief. Although you admit this isn't the regular standard medical model, would you consider trying to submit it to a publication that does use a standard medical model and see if they would at least consider it?
Well, obviously that will depend on the research that's produced and the quality of the research that's produced. But that's certainly on the table. That there's no reason why the results of these studies can be submitted to the peer-reviewed publication. And in fact, there is a lot of precedent for that in the medical literature. Near-death studies being published in the Lancet, and there's quite a few different good precedents for that. We done?
We're done.
Would you all kindly give a round of applause? And I'm sure every belly here thanks you for the free lunch, and we're all enthusiastic about the science. Jan?